Next up in my series of great directors, Jim Jarmusch, classic American director, now 70 years old as of the making of this video, as old as my parents, but I absolutely love his movies. I think he's got a fantastic aesthetic, and let's go through some of his auteur-like choices and his best movies. Jarmusch is, of course, famous for partly making, American indie cinema come alive or, revitalizing it, whatever you want to say about it in terms of its history. But Stranger Than Paradise from 1984, that great movie, which Akira Kurosawa put on his list of favorite movies ever. Jim Jarmusch with that movie and a few others has always sort of worked on the margins, not exactly, but sort of, and then making sort of the flavors of indie movies. I feel like you watch Stranger Than Paradise, and it has all the feel, the tones, sophistication, interest, different art choices that an A24 movie, or some of the A24 movies from the past several years have had. I feel like Jim Jarmusch is like a grandfather of good, strong cinema of today. He also comes about right when the Coen brothers come about, and this sort of interest in genre films from before, he was making movies so, like the Coen brothers, noir. For Jarmusch, it's samurai, horror, and a bunch of other things like that. And then he brings that sort of stuff into his own quirky, weird aesthetic. And then at times, of course, making homages to genre films, just like the Coen brothers. I feel like the Coen brothers have gained in popularity, certainly at least in my circles. People like, you should watch all these Coen brother movies. But Jarmusch, to me, there's a universe in which he could have been the Coens. And then things could have been flipped around where Jarmusch has that sort of cultural cachet, at least in my circles. And you should have watched all these Jarmusch movies. That's not the case for me, but I feel like he has similar kinds of things going on. Maybe he's less of a popularizer than the Coens, but he has similar kinds of tastes, fixating on the weird in America. American culture, whether it's country music in the South, whether it's weird Northeast stuff, horror movies, vampire stuff, samurai, ghetto, all kinds of things like that, bringing them in and sort of blending them together in his own aesthetic. Now, Jarmusch, you can watch all of his feature films and you'll get these sort of patterns in his movies, but also a lot of development. So the first half of his career, I feel like he was doing these very things. One, he was taking two or more weird characters and putting them in a box, a room, a jail cell, something like that, and having weird things happen, strange conversations. The meeting of two weird minds brings up more weirdness. I really like that about him. Just watch the movie, for example, Down by Law, in which Tom Waits and John Lurie and Roberto Benigni are together in a jail cell. And those three are bizarre and strange, and more bizarreness and strangeness come of that. Jarmusch liked, for a while at least, to do that, and his ultimate movie that does this, sort of an anthology movie, is Coffee and Cigarettes, which puts a lot of vignettes together of different kinds of people coming together and just talking over coffee and cigarettes. That's another thing Jarmusch likes to do, which is anthology movies, little vignettes that sort of are pieced together, and maybe they are constructing a whole, or maybe they're just little slivers that are put together, little fragments that make a movie just because it's a movie. Then you get like Mystery Train, which has 3 or 4 scenes and it's sort of anchored by a hotel room. You have Night on Earth, which is 5 different taxi cab scenes throughout the world in one night, and Coffee and Cigarettes. But I also feel like other feature films, even Stranger Than Paradise or Dead Man, are kind of sort of anthology movies, kind of sort of. But along with the anthologies, which are fragments put together, he likes hero's journey kinds of tales where an individual goes on a sort of journey, sort of quest to find stuff. And for example, Broken Flowers, the Bill Murray character goes and looks for his ex-girlfriend's ex-lovers, one of whom might have sired an adult child he's just found out about. And so the movie goes through several different vignettes. It's kind of an anthology film, but it's also Murray on a quest to find, Murray's character to find this ex-lover who had a love child. Dead Man, one of my favorites with Johnny Depp, definitely is this, where the character goes west in a Western and then is taken on a quest by a character named Nobody. One of my favorite modern movies, period. A great movie all around. That's a kind of a quest movie, and I've riffed on that in a video I did on Dead Man. And of course, those quest movies like Dead Man, he loves immigrants and travelers, people coming into a place and being wildly different from that place. For example, in Mystery Train, he has 2 Japanese citizens, boyfriend, girlfriend, I think, come in to Memphis, and they're interested in 1950s American rock and roll, the birth of rock and roll. They like Elvis and so on, and they're like fish out of water. And that's what Stranger Than Paradise has, where a Hungarian citizen, a young Hungarian female, comes to New York City. And so then you have these outsiders, fish out of water sorts of tales. Of course, Roberto Benigni, who appears in, I think, 2, maybe 3 Jarmusch films, is exactly like this. The weirdo Italian who comes into the American South or something like that. And it's always this strange blend of unusual individual, unusual place. They don't know each other. And so what happens when an unusual individual goes into an unusual place? And civilization to the wild. But characters a lot of times are doing that. That happens in Down by Law, where they go from civilization into the wilderness. That definitely is the case in Dead Man. And that's the fish out of water tale too. They out of their own environment into this weird new landscape for them. This is, by the way, American Tropes 101. That's what Stranger Than Paradise is about. The New World. The New World is Stranger Than Paradise. What's it like for an immigrant, an outsider, a foreigner to come into a new world? And America is the ultimate new world of weirdness, which Jarmusch highlights through his musical choices, through his settings, for example. And I think this is a running thread throughout probably all his filmography. These sort of outsider characters coming into this weird new environment or experiencing a weird new environment, of which so much of his cultural commentary about what is America, that gigantic question that's been around since at least North America, the United States, was founded, or even before then during colonization. So the classic question of what is an American comes up throughout Jarmusch's filmography, most of the time indirectly, but occasionally directly. And last, another connecting thread through all of his filmography for the last 30, 40 years is his casting choices. Tom Waits shows up in a lot of Jarmusch movies. Tom Waits is an ultimate, American kind of singer, hybridizing, bringing a bunch of different styles together, which is kind of like what Jarmusch does in his movies. But then, of course, there's a bunch of other, actors who appear and reappear. Bill Murray in the last 5 or 6 Jarmusch movies. Steve Buscemi over... who doesn't love Steve Buscemi? John Lurie, especially early in, Jarmusch's filmography, who also makes great musical choices, shows up in Stranger Than Paradise, Down by Law. I wish he could have kept going there, but, he's a great figure for Jarmusch. Iggy Pop, Tilda Swinton, Isaac de Bancoli. I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I love this guy's face, his character. He shows up in Night on Earth, and then he's highlighted as a main character in The Limits of Control, an assassin movie I really like. Jarmusch, like a number of other great directors, finds these actors he works well with and just keeps bringing them back. But then, of course, their appearances in new movies from Jarmusch helps thread together his filmography. So you see Bill Murray come out on a new movie, and then you remember him in all of these older movies, and you see that Jarmusch is referencing himself and kind of, constructing his own Jarmuschian world. That's, if you watch all of his filmography chronologically as I did, you will start to feel these weird connections, that some of these settings are overlapping and some of these characters are overlapping. So now I'm going to go through my favorite Jarmusch movies. You can go look at my list of Jarmusch movies on Letterboxd. I think, first of all, Stranger Than Paradise is kind of a film miracle. I really agree with people who love it, like Kurosawa. I think you can't remake the movie. If you tried to make this movie 1,000 different times, it couldn't come out this good. I think it's just the performances and the setting. The black and white gives it a classic feel, a richness. It is an immigrant coming to America story. But it's also traveling around America, buddy road trip, buddy sidekick kinds of stuff. I love that Jarmusch does not use, and this doesn't work very much, but he doesn't use establishment shots. Often you don't see the exterior of a building where you're going into, and you're left to imagine where these characters are. There's a number of little film techniques that he does like that are part of his own style. Fades to black, for example, are sort of his classic transitions, at least in some of his films, to indicate, I think, chapter divisions. Some of his movies kind of feel like novels to me. And so Stranger Than Paradise is, I think, the best, the quirkiest, the most interesting movie. But arguably it's not. Now, by the way, Jarmusch top 10 lists are all wildly different. Don't get any consensus among these. Just go Google it or go search for it. You'll get different lists, so my list will look different than other people. My recommendations, therefore, are my own idiosyncratic recommendation. I think that's what Jarmusch brings out, is like the idiosyncratic human qualities in everybody when they watch, and what they see and what they notice, what they feel. I feel like that speaks to his top 10 list, by the way, all of which are quite different. Because we're all quite different, interesting, rich humans. And to me, Jarmusch is kind of a humanist in that way. His characters and the way he treats the audience and the material is as if we're all rich and alive. That was my number one film. Let's go way back. Now, there are two movies I think a lot of people love, but I didn't. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, with Forest Whitaker, and Broken Flowers with Bill Murray. A lot of people praise these movies. I didn't like them as much for whatever reason. I think Ghost Dog is an interesting experiment in trying to mash up the ghetto movie with the samurai movie. Two things that don't seem to go together at all. And that's worth trying. It's in the Criterion Collection. Broken Flowers doesn't work for me. Bill Murray's too stoic. He doesn't seem like he would be a lover of many, many women in this movie. There's a bunch of other things about that, but people do like it. So these two movies actually kind of go together. They're kind of quest movies in a way, men seeking something, but they're not seeking an object at the end of their quest like a holy grail. It's something else. And so that's what's always interesting about these Jarmusch quest movies. What are you seeking? A lot of times these characters don't know. In fact, and that's very typical. I rate highly Jarmusch's like 4 anthology movies. I don't know whether they call them all anthology movies, but Coffee and Cigarettes is definitely that. Down by Law, wonderfully shot movie, wonderful cinematography in this. In fact, it is super memorable. I would watch Down by Law just for the way it looks. It's fantastically filmed. In fact, Jarmusch does not get enough credit for being a director with a fantastic eye, willing to pick out great shots, great music. He's a top-notch artist. And so he's one of our great directors, cinematically, filmically, his eye for things. He makes so many great shots. He knows how to make things look great. So I just have to praise him for that. And Down by Law will show you that if no other movie will. So Coffee and Cigarettes, Down by Law, Night on Earth, Mystery Train. I think these 4 movies come out within a 10 to 15 year period. And they're all very interesting to me. I like him taking two weirdos and putting them together and having them have weird conversations. That's just plain fun. He knows how to do that really well. But here are my top 3 other movies besides Stranger Than Paradise. The first one is The Limits of Control. This is where I get weird. Most people don't like this movie as much as I do. I was hypnotized by it. This is a man on a quest. It's an assassin. It's an anti-James Bond movie. And it's so interesting where this movie goes to me. It does have a coffee and cigarettes feel. This character goes to cafes and orders 2 espressos. By the way, this character is an idiosyncratic weirdo, like so many Jarmusch characters. But I just love the whole feel, the aesthetic. The movie hypnotized me, frankly. The Limits of Control. I would try that out. Most people like Ghost Dog, and I think the way they feel about Ghost Dog, I feel about The Limits of Control. So you're going to have to try both movies and see if they're for you or not. But the 3 movies I think everybody should watch from Jarmusch, or at least try. Stranger Than Paradise, I've mentioned. Patterson. Okay, 2016 movie about the poet. Adam Driver's in it. Ordinary person who creates great artwork. Jarmusch is from Ohio. Akron, Ohio, around that area. I feel like he's a Midwesterner, sort of. I kind of have a kinship with him, and maybe that's why I like him. But this sort of Patterson, New Jersey character, ordinary guy character, who is creating great art. It's just a wonderful movie structurally, symbolically. It plays around with postmodern stuff but doesn't put it in your face. I just love this movie, as a number of other people do. It's one of the best movies of the 2010s. And that speaks to Jarmusch as an artist. In 2016 he makes a great movie. In 1984 he makes a great movie. Over 30 years apart from each other, and I think he can keep going. Even though he's 70, he can keep making great movies, and he writes and directs them. And the other great movie, and that's from the middle of his career at this point, is Dead Man with Johnny Depp. A wonderful Western, a riff, maybe it's anti-Dances with Wolves kind of movie. I just love this movie. You would think nothing new could come out of Westerns, but Dead Man offers much that is new, and outstanding cameos in this movie, wild and fascinating music, and probably the best performance in any Jarmusch movie, and that is super, super high praise. Performance by Gary Farmer, who plays an Indian named Nobody, and it's my favorite of all. I just remember this character. I'll probably remember this character forever, and it's a buddy road trip kind of thing. I just love it to death. This is the only Jarmusch collection I could find. It's German. It doesn't have a couple of the movies I mentioned, and yet it's got like all of his movies from up to 2012. So get this if you want. This was fantastic. I like the cover. I'm not getting sponsored by this. I just thought this was great stuff. And if you want to go through Jarmusch chronologically, this is the way to do it so far until somebody else comes out with a better collection. But who knows if that's going to happen. So what do you think of Jim Jarmusch as an auteur, filmmaker, artist? Any of his movies I mentioned, let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Check out other videos of my Great Director series. It takes me a lot of time to do these. Many hours, but they're so much fun. This was a work of love. Have a great day.